let's turn this thing on and let's see what kind of trouble this gets us into.
Yeah.
So theoretically here, that should switch over. And hey, I think we're live in Technicolor. Awesome. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Nate Shuda, in case you didn't know that. I'm part of the advocacy team at VMware. Best way to describe me is architect as a service. As I go places, I talk to people. Although I will admit, the first time someone called me that, I sounded out the acronym in my head and realized it may not actually have been a compliment. Not sure, not sure. So this is a new stream that we're going to try here on the Twitch. For me, selfishly, it's an excuse to get together with my friends. Normally I would be flying to all these interesting cities and I would randomly bump into my friends and we'd go and have a cup of coffee or a nice dinner or a nice breakfast or whatever, and we'd just chat. And so selfishly, it's an excuse for me to get together with my buddies. Now, where I think this is hopefully interesting to people beyond just me to sort of salve my own missing link of what it is to be in pandemic times, I want to get to know these people and I want to give them an opportunity for everyone else to get to know these people. And maybe they'll regret that. I don't know. I guess we'll see what kind of trouble it gets into. So I think in one place I describe this as inside the actor's studio, except for geeks. So if I can be quite that bold. So I'm delighted that my good friend Ken Cousin has decided to be my first victim guest. I don't know what the right phrase is. So there's nothing prepared here. Ken's not going to be live coding. I'm not going to be live coding. There's not going to be any slideware. We're just going to chat and see what kind of trouble it gets us into. So, hi Ken, how are you?
Oh, great. Well, I got to say, thank you very much. I'm really honored, really, that I'm to be the premier debut guest or whatever,
Right?
the bug fix version, I suppose.
It's the beta release, so if it doesn't work, it's
Yeah,
okay. We'll just throw it in the trash.
right. I'm the beta tester, and I'm perfectly happy with that. That's
Right,
great.
right. If it doesn't work, we'll reschedule. We'll come back later. We'll do it again. We'll do it live, as they say.
And of course, it'll be so popular, we'll reschedule sometime in 2032 or
I
something
hope
like that.
so. I hope so. That's the goal, that this will be heavily oversubscribed. And interesting enough, I actually, when the tweet went out last week about this, I did have a few people ping me, and at least one of them was on my list. I don't know, the others was on a different list, but we won't get into that, at least, not on the
Well,
version that's headed out into the wild here. But
well, I plan to subscribe as
well,
soon as we're done.
fantastic. Well, thank you,
You'll have
sir.
at least one.
And that's all I'm asking for. Because the journey of a million miles begins with a single subscriber. I think is how that works. But well, Ken, let's start with the basics. Tell me a little, well, tell our audience a little about yourself. I mean, I obviously know your background fairly well. I know you went to some second-rate colleges that you might be too embarrassed to talk about, but give us your rundown. Give us your bio. Tell us how you got into this crazy world we call software.
Well, okay. The really short answer to that is that I'm a one person company. I teach software development training classes primarily, although I do some other stuff, speaking on the No Fluff Just Stuff tour with Nate, of course, and um, write books occasionally and things like that. But primarily, I teach software development training classes, primarily in areas related to Java, including things like Spring, of course, but other alternative JVM languages, Groovy, Kotlin, and topics like Android and things like that. So I'm based in Connecticut for what it's worth. So I'm roughly halfway between New York City and Boston, a little bit more on the Boston side. So think Patriots, not Yankees, think not Giants, think Red Sox, not Yankees, but so
So
be
you're
it.
on the good side of Connecticut, is what you're trying to say.
Uh, I think it's better. Yeah, I think this is much easier to deal with than the other side. The other side
Right.
gets a little more intense, I
Sure,
suppose.
sure, that's fair.
Yeah, back when we used to travel, my wife and I would take the train into New York periodically, but now that's gone. I always joke when we're talking about exception handling in Java that the definition of an illegal state exception is New York.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, that checks out. Checks out. So
so just trying to get in trouble right off the bat. Go
well,
ahead.
right, and I see you are wearing your Patriots garb here today. Well
Yeah.
played. How are you feeling about Tom Brady no longer being a Patriot?
Oh, hey,
It's
I
fine.
think they did the right thing letting him go. I'm very happy for Tom. Good luck to him. I think he's going to be a disaster at some point, and I'm okay with it.
Wow,
I
wow.
think Cam's working out great. No, I'm rooting for him. I mean,
Oh, sure,
he's
sure.
he's an old guy, and us old guys stick together. I
Yeah,
get it,
that's fair.
but it's not going to be pretty, and it was already starting to not be pretty the last year or two. So Yeah, all right, I'm fine with it.
It was very strange to see him in a uniform other than the Patriots colors. It was
That, yeah,
very
I can't get
strange.
used to that.
No, no, but
Yeah, that looks very weird.
the Cam Newton signing, not that this is a sports show, but the Cam Newton signing to me was once again, how did nobody else sign him? I just am amazed by that,
Yeah, that was
so
beautiful.
yeah, so kudos again to Bill Belichick for always seeing through all that. But well, I'm delighted you're here. Thank you so much for being my debut guest. So I know the kind of things that you train on. Tell our guests a little bit more, our audience here, a bit more about the kind of trainings that you do. I know that's been your. How long have you been doing that again? I know I've had this conversation with
Well,
you.
sure. Well, I was a career changer, like so
Yeah,
many
talk
people
through that.
on IT. So, all right. Well, if you want some of the background, then I came up through the engineering areas. I was in mechanical engineering and in math. So my undergrad degrees back, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, uh, I have a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and a bachelor's in math from MIT, and then I went to Princeton and got a master's and a PhD in aerospace engineering, and then I was a research scientist. So research for me was lots of math and lots of Fortran, basically. So I mean, the nightmares have ended, but it took a long time.
It's fair.
I joined a company up in Connecticut, United Technologies.
Hmm.
It's funny, you're getting older when all the companies that you used to work for no longer
Right,
exist
right. They've been
anymore.
acquired and yeah, or shuttered. Yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah, they're part of Raytheon now, so I don't know. Any rate, I was part of a research center there, United Technologies Research Center. We worked with Pratt and Whitney aircraft engines and Sikorsky helicopters and Otis elevators and Carrier air conditioners, but we had NASA contracts and things like that. And I did that for about 12 years. I was in a couple of engineering groups, and then I switched over to what would be popular now, but back then was very unusual. I kind of joined an AI group.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was a guy at the research center who was into neural nets and genetic algorithms and things like that. And I thought, well, that sounded cool. So I went over to do that. And it only took me about, 3 months to realize that 10, 15 years of coding in Fortran hadn't really taught me anything about software development.
Right.
So I wound up going back to school at night through there
Okay.
and wound up with a master's in computer science. So then I left the company, left everything, and joined a training company to teach software development. So I was part of a very tiny 12-person company. I think we went up to about 15, 16 for a while, came back down to about 8. This was right before the bubble burst on the e-commerce boom. So I,
Oh yeah.
I taught my first training class, I remember, was actually May 31st of 2000 itself.
Nice. That's
I
crazy.
remember the date because it was such a big deal to
Right.
escape, the
Right.
research center and start doing that. And I was at that consulting group for about 5 years, off and on. Well, the whole time I was there, and then after that, when I left there in 2005 and went out on my own as my one-person company, it was Ginger's idea, my wife's idea to call it Cousin IT because she pronounced it cousin it like the Adams
It's
family. And
appropriate.
yeah, I thought it was funny, and I said, well, I'll come up with something more serious, and of course I couldn't come up with anything.
Right. Right.
So it's always been Cousin IT Incorporated. She said, well, this way people will spell it right, which they don't, or they'll pronounce it right, which they
They
don't.
don't.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so I had brief time with other companies. It was a checkered history there for a little while, but basically I've been on my own as a one-person company for, I guess, a little over 15 years now.
Oh, that's crazy. So how did you, I mean, I know you from being in the Java space and
Hmm.
Kotlin and Spring and everything in between. How did you get into Java? What sort of stood out to you like, yeah, this is the ecosystem that I want to be a part of?
That actually happened right in the mid 90s when I was
Okay.
still at the research center. I knew I was tired of Fortran and I was interested. I was always interested in the software side of it. I just wasn't good at it. And when I looked at C and C, I found that it wasn't that appealing. It wasn't going to be easy for me to do that in an engineering job.
Hmm.
And when Java came along in the mid 90s, it was so streamlined and simplified versus C++. I always thought
Sure.
that you couldn't be a mediocre C++ developer. All you did was cause trouble, but you could be a mediocre Java developer. And I thought, okay, so I got Bruce Eccles' first edition of the old Thinking in
Yes.
Java book. Remember that one?
Yes.
Right. And so my transition was from Fortran to Java, which
Okay.
was a bit of a leap.
Right.
And yeah, when I joined that AI group, then I was coding in Java, which again wasn't necessarily as relevant as I wanted. But then I decided to go right around, 99, 2000, go get certified and everything. And everything's been Java related since then. I picked up Groovy around 2007
Okay.
timeframe, right after the Ruby on Rails
Yes.
meteor hit the Java world, really. I tried to learn Ruby, but at the time it was too big a transition for me.
Hmm.
Whereas I already had experience with Spring and Hibernate, so Grails was a natural. So with Grails, I had to learn Groovy, and I really kind of fell in love with Groovy.
Sure.
So I spent a lot of time there, and then went back to Java when Java 1.8 came out with streams and lambdas, and then finally the move in Android to Kotlin as the primary language, combined with Gradle using a Kotlin DSL, meant okay, it was time to actually move into that as well. So now I've got books on all these things, and that's where I'm comfortable now.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Groovy. I remember reading Scott Davis's Groovy book back in the day
Right?
and borderline crying as I'm reading it because of how much of the boilerplate cruftiness of Java just melts away. And you're just like, why can't it always be like this? And then Lombok's like, oh, okay, cool. I can kind of, merge those two worlds together and deal with all that. As a total aside, I remember trying to bring Groovy into an organization in a very small way to help our build process. And I was shut down because what was the phrase? We don't resort to wacky workarounds here. And I thought, oh, okay. I mean, there's a lot of wacky workarounds, but okay, fine.
Well,
It's just a language
I
on a
was
JVM.
hoping that, I mean, when I first learned about it, I got really excited about it, and I sent at the time my primary work was all as subcontractors to training companies.
Hmm.
So I told all the training companies, "Wow, this is the future. This is going to be awesome." And they said, "Well, send us an outline." And nothing persisted in happening for like 2 years. And
Sure,
it wasn't until around 2010 that Groovy took off, at least for me.
sure.
And I'd say Groovy and Grails and Gradle and Spock and that whole ecosystem pretty much funded my company for the next 3 or 4 years, I'd say. And I still get requests for it. It's not as common. Of course, Spring was always friendly with Groovy as well.
Hmm.
And now it's much more back to Java again. I still look forward to using it. I still use it occasionally. Grails is still a going thing. It's just, it's one of those odd circumstances where, they say your best feature is sometimes your biggest liability. And
Sure.
the people at the head of the Groovy framework and the Grails framework, people like, Guillaume Forge and Paul King and Graham Roche, they're among the most humble, brilliant guys I've ever met,
Yeah.
and this means that they do great work and they're very friendly and very welcoming to newcomers and everything, but they're terrible at self promotion. They don't really push it. So it's not like one of these benevolent dictators where everybody goes, "Oh, I got to go do that."
Right.
No, they're really quiet and like, "Oh, if you want to use this, sure, here's how you do it. And if you don't want to do it,
That's
okay, that's
fine.
fine. We can work with you." And
Right.
it's like, okay. But at least it's a very friendly community. And fortunately, that was true about the Kotlin community as well. So that's good. But at least they have a company pushing that.
Well, I know Groovy actually brought you to my home state in the worst of all possible months to visit Minnesota. I still remember you coming out to my house in January when we were having one of those beautiful cold spells where the high temperature for the day was below zero. And if I remember right, we were already having kind of a cold stretch to begin with, so it was well below normal. And yeah, but you still made it, and you survived.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, the high that day was five below.
Yeah,
A
so
couple of
yeah, and that's not even factoring in wind chill.
No, wind chill there's no point in talking about wind chill
No,
because
no, it'll make
if
you
there was
cry.
any breeze at all, then you might as well just pack it in. And
Right.
I couldn't believe the car started every day, so I was at least pleased with that. But I did go in and ask the students. I did remind them that you are actually allowed to live other places. There are other states. You don't have to. to do this.
Absolutely, and to be fair, January is the month that I wish I lived in another state. But here's the thing: no state has perfect weather. I've had this conversation with multiple people. So, good friends of ours live in the southeast, and I remember visiting them one day, and it was June-ish, and 7 in the morning, I go outside, and it's already in the 90s, and the dew
Mm.
points like in the 70s. I mean, it's tropical, and I'm immediately just drenched. And I look at my friend and I'm like, Stu, how do you people live here? And he said, what do you mean? I said, Stu, I've been outside less than a minute and I have to go change and shower. He said, oh, we don't go outside in the summer. I said, Stu, I got a word for that where I come from. It's called winter. He said, oh, my winters are beautiful. I'm like, so are my summers and my falls and my springs. It's really just that stretch. Frankly, when you visit it, that's the time you generally don't want to live in Minnesota. But, we all just hibernate. Much as we do now in quarantine, that's what we do in January.
Well, I need to be a snowbird at some point, but haven't quite gotten there yet.
My wife and I have had that conversation. I'm not going to lie to you.
Oh, very good.
That has come up, and then it's like, well, where would
Well,
we snowbird to?
I also remember you telling me that, in this whole crisis of global warming, there's some states are going to be winners and some are going to be losers, and
Yeah,
might as well be in Minnesota.
right.
Connecticut right now is actually reasonable on that, except that we keep getting clobbered by nasty storms. But okay.
Hurricanes.
Well, we didn't. It wasn't a hurricane that we had about a month ago. We had the remnants of a hurricane. It
Right,
was a
right,
tropical storm, but it did knock out our power for about a week. So,
right. Well, you just got
yeah.
to get that battery wall set up. That's what you need to go along with that
Well, I have
beautiful.
a generator,
Oh,
so
there you
I
go.
mean, I was okay there. But I didn't. What I didn't realize is that when they knocked out the power, it wasn't just going to be the power; it was going to be the internet, and that was a
Ooh,
crisis. If they knocked out the internet, then not my
what do
whole
we do?
life is online. Actually wound up teaching a whole training class using my phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot, and I was
Wow.
rather impressed that it actually worked to some degree. I was one of those no fluff, just stuff
Okay.
virtual workshops, actually.
That is pretty impressive, and
Yeah.
we actually had this conversation with somebody recently. Imagine if quarantine had happened 20 years ago before we all
Oh,
had ubiquitous high-speed internet and could stream everything that's ever been produced. I mean, imagine what that would have been like, how.
been a disaster. Yeah.
Right. I mean, think about we couldn't do distance learning. My son's 13, and so he's doing virtual school right now. I think upstairs. I don't know. I assume so. I mean, he my internet must be okay, so I'm assuming that he's not playing Fortnite. But it that's something I've actually talked to other parents about. Even if you go back 10 years or 15 years and this happens, it would have been a little dicier, and you would have had to, I guess, pick up packets or something from school and do it that way. But I don't
Oh, it
know.
would have been a mess. I mean, I'm fortunate at this point in that we are empty nesters.
Yeah.
My boy moved out, and I think actually it's going to take this time. Well, he did move out and then move back. He said, "I'm
Right.
a millennial. That's what we do."
Right. Right.
But he did move back out again, and it looks like, hey, we may be in the clear. He actually came by for the first time since the lockdown. We actually got to see him briefly, more or less social distance and all
Right.
that. He looks like a hip, like a goofball,
That's fine.
like he always did,
It's
I
fine.
guess. But it was nice to at least know that he really does exist, not just some
Sure.
text on the other end of the phone.
Sure. Sure. It's not a bot that's pretending to be your son and sending you text messages. Yeah. No, I
Exactly.
understand that.
He's a lesson in humility. You know how it is.
Oh, I do. That's a proud owner of a teenager. I
Yeah.
understand. I understand. I hear you. But well, speaking of quarantine, do you have any quarantine habits that you've picked up that you're hoping to continue once we're allowed to, freely associate with other human beings?
Well, I don't know about habits, but I know I did say to my wife last week after a call, I did warn her that I was coming downstairs in my Zoom outfit, and I didn't have to define that. She knew exactly what I meant, and I
Fair enough.
suspect you do as well.
Yes, I have. Knowing you, I think I could even visualize it. But
You don't want to, yeah, that's not something you want to do. That would burn your eyes and all that. But yeah, so that definitely has been a ramification of this whole quarantine is
sure.
the whole concept of a Zoom outfit, right?
Yeah, well, my wardrobe has devolved rapidly since I joined the Pivotal VMware ecosystem. I have the work from home pajamas, as my wife refers to it, and then when I leave the house, back when we used to leave the house, it was basically like jeans and a t-shirt and a hoodie. So, really my wardrobe has evolved a bit from when I had an enterprise job.
I don't know. That's how I always imagine you, pretty much. But
Pretty much, yeah, yeah.
but
Although
then
I
again, I usually saw you on the tour, so
That's true. That's true. And I do joke with my wife that as part of a sort of mental transition, at the end of the day, I change out of my restrictive work from home pajamas to my lounging pajamas, just so that I have a mental switch that this is different. So I did put on this shirt today just because otherwise, normally I wear like conference t-shirts, but my cats like to lay on them, and I'm actually surprised one of the cats hasn't decided to be between me and the keyboard. I actually had a call last week and they were banging on the keyboard as I was trying to do my job, which was really fun, but the joy
very
of
good.
small animals. But so you didn't learn how to like bake bread or you don't have a
No,
sourdough
that
starter or anything like that?
yeah, that wasn't my thing. I mean, I've been watching way too many, stream television shows and
Sure,
things like
sure.
that. We've been working through. We never did watch Enterprise.
Okay.
The Star Trek one that was 2000 to 2004 got canceled. So we're working our way through that. We've been through so many other series. We got all these subscription services.
Right?
No, I mean, what's really been striking, of course, is that as with your job, I used to travel all the time. I mean, I
Hmm.
had several years there where when I counted back, there were over 200 to 250 days out of the office.
Yeah.
I was really on travel. And now I get my little monthly email from Google
Oh,
saying, here are the places you've been. And it's like
and
three
oop,
cities
never
all
been.
within
Yep.
10 miles. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Or the whole trip it calendar that says you have no trips scheduled. And
That.
I'm actually kind of okay with that because I was getting to the point where the travel was getting old anyway.
Yeah.
But wow, it's such a contrast. It's so different.
Oh, I can
The other
completely echo
neat
that.
thing, though, I'm sorry, what you were
Well,
saying?
I can completely echo that. I mean, I used to check the TripIt app, the Marriott app, the Delta app
Right.
multiple times a day, and now it's like, oh yeah, there's nothing in there. Why am I, you know?
I mean, the good news is that I've gotten to give talks at user groups that were, pretty much all over the world,
Right.
and I was already transitioning to courses like at the through the O'Reilly Learning Platform. That's where I do a lot of my teaching that isn't direct with a client or whatever. And we really get people from everywhere.
Right.
And I really get a kick out of that. I love the fact that we have people from in the same classroom from Bangalore and Abu Dhabi and various places in Europe and South America and of course in the US. I just think that's fantastic. So
Yeah.
I like that, but it is really weird, to be like that compared to what we had in
Oh.
the before times. Yeah.
Oh no. One of the apps that I have will tell me how many hours I've spent on airplanes, and that was pretty normal for me to be in that 400-hour range. And now, obviously, this year it's a fraction of that because we basically stopped traveling in March, I think was when things started canceling for us.
Right.
So now that time gets spent for me. Like I've been playing golf since it's nice out, and I've been riding my bike, but I don't know what's going to happen when the weather gets cold here. It's a little chilly today. It's in like the 50s, and I can't translate to Celsius. I just know the rough ideas of Celsius temperature, so maybe that's like 12. I should ask Cote. He could probably do it now, but it's going to be weird when the weather turns. I'm not sure what my brain is going to do then, to be honest with you.
Well, what I've been trying to do in our area, of course, we're trying to support some of the local restaurants, and I mean, in addition to like just the basic food bank and stuff, we also are trying to help out some of the local restaurants, and several of them opened up seating outside.
Yeah,
But this isn't Los Angeles. I mean,
right.
that's going to work for 2 to 3 months of the year total, maybe.
Yeah.
And then after that, I don't know what's going to happen to them again. So we've been trying to order out even when we didn't necessarily need to, just to see if we could help a little bit.
Yeah. No, we've been doing the same thing, and I've had that same thought that in the summer, in the fall, in the spring, mostly around here, you certainly can have outdoor dining if the facility is
Mm.
available, but you're not going to do that in January, February. That would be. And I mean, if you had those outdoor heater things, I guess that would extend your season a bit, but it's not a 12-month a year thing here either. So I'd be curious to see how that pushes things forward here.
Yeah, I was reading there was an article in the New York Times about that, about there's a major rush on those outdoor heaters for
Oh,
the
I bet.
various restaurants, and even those aren't necessarily going to work, but and the small restaurants are going to have difficulty getting them again.
Right.
But we'll see. I mean, it's not going to be long before the temperature starts dropping
Right.
uh, around here as well. So we're actually doing okay. We're in the 70s and 80s at the moment, Fahrenheit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I realized actually I was looking, and while there are other countries in the world who use some of the British English units for length or some other measurements, we're it for
Yeah.
Fahrenheit. That's
Yeah.
it. That's the only country left. So everybody else talks about 15, 20, 20 degrees. I'm
And
like,
you're like,
no,
wait, what? What does that mean? Yeah.
30. Yeah.
It is interesting how we've sort of clung to that system, and I don't know about you, but I've gotten to the point I've traveled enough where I can generally think in terms of kilometers. I can think in terms of pounds and euros and certain other currencies. I've just never figured out Fahrenheit beyond the rough idea that 20s are nice. You know, the teens, upper teens are okay. Lower teens getting a little chilly. Single digit cold, below zero bad. You know, beyond just the rough ballpark, I really don't know how to do the
Well,
translation.
I did a class in Montreal a few years
Oh,
ago. And it was, again, it wasn't winter exactly, but it was cold. And that's where it really drove home that zero means something. I
sure.
mean, zero's significant because
Right.
above freezing and below freezing really did change everything.
Hmm.
And therefore, I got a really good feel for that one. If they said it was five, then that meant something. And if it was -5, that meant something
Ooh,
too.
right.
Whereas I did a class in Boston and it was -5 and it was just absolutely brutal because
Right.
that was Fahrenheit, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They meant -5. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
hear you there.
That was awful. Whereas I don't know about 100. That would be bad, but otherwise,
Yeah, certainly high 30s is not great, to say the
no,
least. That's
no.
not a great place to be. I know that much, right? That they're the boundaries of it. But yeah, I think the ship has sailed on that. I'm not so sure this country's ever going to adapt for better or worse.
No, right now, I think we're all basically in survival mode. Just let's get through whatever's going on in the world right now and see where it takes us. I don't think we're talking about that transition doesn't seem terribly high on the priority list right at
Not
the
really, not really. I've stopped saying, well, it can't possibly get any worse because 2020 just keeps saying, hold my beer, and yet another terrible thing happens, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
So hopefully that'll be, I don't know. Again, we're just trying to all make it through without becoming awful people, trying
yeah,
to find ways to still help those who need some assistance or trying to share things out if possible. I'm lucky in that by being a one person company, I don't have to get approval to do
sure,
things. I don't have to get permission. I can't get laid off. I can go out of business.
right,
You know,
right,
that's right. I mean, that's the price you pay is
yeah,
I can not have any income at all, but at least I can take time and see if I can help others or speak at a user group or do whatever, give away extra books to groups for women and underrepresented minorities, things like that. Of
yeah,
course, I don't publish the books. I write them through companies, so I don't have complete freedom there.
right,
But
right.
but at least it can do something, and that's I think that's I don't know if that's going to help us or not, but it's going to help me. That's
Yeah,
trying to stay true to where I live and
yeah.
as long as I can possibly do it.
No, I hear that. Yeah, it's one thing that I've actually kind of enjoyed about this pandemic time, so to speak, is that we are getting a view into people's lives that we don't normally. I mean, I've been remote
Mm,
now for almost 4 years, so this is pretty normal for me. But being
mm.
able to see into other people's lives, I think, is kind of beneficial. And it feels like we've kind of gotten past the you don't have to apologize that you have a dog. You don't have to
Oh
apologize
yeah,
that you have a family. It kind of kills me anytime someone's like, "Oh, I'm sorry about that." It's like, that's cool, man. Like, let's see the dog. Bring the dog in.
that's
Come on. Let's
always
see the
good to
puppy.
see it.
Yeah.
I read an interesting thread on Twitter recently, and I can't find though. I'll have to find it and put it in a newsletter or whatever. But a woman who was in international relations and had traveled all over the world, she pointed out that what happened to her all the time is you hit a wall at 6 months. Says 6 months is the magical amount of time, and then everything becomes very, very difficult. You've
Okay.
adjusted as much as you can, and you've now gotten to the point where you're like, oh, let's just stop. That's
Sure.
enough. And you just have to make it through the next couple of weeks, and then you get your second, third, fourth wind, whatever it might
Hmm.
be, and you can go on. But she said she's learned to anticipate it, and that. this for all of us is basically our 6 month time, because
Yeah,
we all kind of locked down in the middle of March.
right.
Here we are in the middle of September. Hey, it's September because there's a new Java version, you know? And now it's just hard on people. And if you just somehow can make it through, of
Right.
course, we're all trying to make it through November as well. And then
True.
things will hopefully get easier,
Right.
or at
Yeah,
least we'll adjust again to a new normal, whatever that
right.
means.
And I am very interested to see what sort of new normal looks like afterwards. My wife and I are having this conversation. I don't think offices are going to be the same when this is over. I think a lot of companies now are seeing, geez, we actually can get a fair amount done virtually. What does this do to cities that are sort of designed around that? Are we going to get rid of the open office plan? I don't know. I think it's going to have a shift.
Well, you might have seen that was, I can't remember the guy's name, but the head of Netflix came out and said nothing good has come out of remote work and he can't wait to get everybody back in an office again. And other people have commented it has a lot to do with the company culture
Sure.
around it. And I always talk about it when I talk about, managing your manager and all that, it's all about if everybody is remote, then there are ways to work through that because at least the normal communication mechanisms will take advantage of the remote people. You'll be using Slack or some chat system or whatever it is that is normal for your company. If everybody's co located, well, fine, that's good too. But if some are remote and some are local, that's a challenge
Sure.
because it's very easy for a manager to say, oh, we have a crisis and go out in the so called bullpen or whatever and just complain about it right there and forget about all the remote people.
Sure.
So, some people say that what's likely to happen is that we'll go back to, say, 2 to 3 days in the office every week and the rest remote. But the other big challenge, you see what's happening in Silicon Valley, is the question of if you move out of the Silicon Valley area, are they going to cut your pay because you don't
Mm,
require quite as much? And then there was the other debate that came up, which is really controversial, is that the companies are making all these extra accommodations for parents who had childcare issues they had to take care of and all these related issues. And the single people were like, hey, how come they're getting extra money when we're the ones doing all the extra work? And it's like, wait a minute. I mean, these sorts of battles, disagreements, which we have not had to deal with before, are now going to be right in front of everybody.
sure. A little bit of that sounds like a Simpsons episode. I remember when that came up, the
Yeah,
parentless or
well,
the childless versus the people with kids. Yeah, that's
they
fascinating.
were
That's
quite prescient on many levels,
oh
yes.
yeah, sadly. So my son is working his way through Simpsons, and it's funny to
uh,
see some of those again, as he walks through it. But yeah, I don't know. I
so
you
you
know
have,
I did somebody made this comment that, oh, we're never going to have in-person events again, which I think is silly.
no.
We may have different ones, fewer ones, but I mean, I don't know about you, but I presenting to a screen is hard. I miss the audience. I miss that interaction. And I think it also, we lose that sort of adjacent possible, the bumping into somebody in the hallway, meeting somebody that you wouldn't meet otherwise. And some virtual events have done a very good job with that. Some, it's still a struggle. I think I like what we did for Spring One a few weeks back. To your
Hmm.
point earlier about getting people from all over the world, and we had somewhere north of like 40,000 people, and that clearly
Wow.
was people who would not normally be able to travel to whatever city we happen to be in. So it does open up some possibilities, but it is going to be different, and be interesting to see what that looks like when we get to that point.
Well, I'm sure there'll be in-person events again. I mean, once we have a reliable vaccine and a distribution network that can cover 6 billion people, so we'll
Just
see.
that small
Sometime,
matter of implementation detail.
yeah, that's going to be a bit of an issue too. This is not
Hmm.
just a question of getting the vaccine; it's distributing it to everybody. But
Right,
but in the meantime, I do like the remote events just so that you're still interacting with somebody,
right,
but some of them are better than others at providing the equivalent of a hallway track. And some people are more comfortable presenting with an audience where you only get feedback through the chat box than others. But it,
hmm
it really makes you welcome any feedback on chat though.
yeah, yeah. I think the hard part for me is just having to ramp up my energy because I'm not getting anything reflected back at me when I'm talking, and that's been a bit of a transition. But again, I think I'm very privileged that my job has pretty much stayed the same, and I'm probably similar for you. I mean, we're kind of doing the same stuff. It's just a little different, and I miss seeing people. I miss having
Yeah.
coffee with you, and again, that's why I decided to do this little
Oh yeah.
series.
Well, we met on the tour, on the
Yeah.
No Fluff Stuff tour, and I still believe, and I really shouldn't say this out loud, I suppose, but that I still believe for those who are listening that Nate is basically the best presenter on the tour, and
See,
I'll
this is why
deny
you're my
that.
first guest.
Well, I'll deny it if anybody asks me,
It's fine.
or otherwise, but um, part of the appeal of being on the tour at all, as you say, is that especially for someone like me, when I teach training classes, teaching is a very isolating profession because even though you're around students, that's a very different relationship.
Yeah.
It's much more having a community when you see people on the No Fluff tour, where you meet people in various cities. That's much more enjoyable and going out to dinner and
Right.
then having a group of people you can interact with. And that's what we're struggling with now. I think it would be harder if we didn't already have a community that we're trying to rely on now. If you were somebody just young and trying to break in and everything, I think that would be even more difficult on a
Yeah.
lot of that.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, that's the part I miss the most is those sort of the hallway conversations that we all used to have, running into somebody at the venue or at the hotel or wherever, and so yeah, that's what I miss, for sure.
By the way, did you tell people yet where the title of what do you call this? Are you
Oh,
calling this a screencast, a Twitch chat? What are you
uh,
calling it?
I don't know what. I mean, it is streaming on Twitch, so it's a live event. It's also being recorded, and it'll end up on YouTube, and it will likely also become a podcast if I can figure out how to strip away the video.
I mean, I
So
got the reference, but not everybody's going
thank
to
you
get
for reminding me of that. So it's between
that.
chair and keyboard is what I ended up calling this because there's that old engineering adage that the problem exists between chair and keyboard. In other words, user error, closed works as designed,
Good old
insert wherever you.
pepcac, right?
Yeah, yeah. I knew you would get that as a former, like an actual engineer, not this fake engineering that we software people like to call ourselves. But yeah, I that dawned on me at one point, and I pinged Tasha, and I'm like, yeah, I think I got to call it this, and she's like, I love it. And I'm like, all right, then we're going with that.
Oh
So
yeah, I think it's a great name. I
thank
just
you.
want to make sure that anybody who didn't get the reference, we made sure we cleared that up, just
Thank you
so
for
you
reminding me. I did
you
have
know.
that in my notes to talk about at the beginning, and then I forgot. So,
Which reminds me, the one upgrade I really need in my office is I do have to invest in a decent chair. I've just still
oh
been
yeah,
reluctant to do that, and I know you've got one of those really nice ones, and yeah, we'll have to talk. I need because the problem is it's what is it, the paradox of choice,
oh
that
yeah,
there are just too many really nice chairs
there
out
are.
there, and since I can't go sit in one, I don't know what to do. So I do have a nice mic, and I've got a
Yes, you
decent
do.
webcam, and I even got Ginger a good webcam
Yeah,
now
there you go.
you
There you
know,
go. Yeah,
yeah, what the ladies appreciate.
that's
But
right.
uh, I still need to upgrade the chair.
Yeah,
I know
it's
that's
important.
irrelevant, but whatever.
No, I'm with you. Oh, well, it's between chair and keyboard, so you have to have a good chair and a good
That's
keyboard.
right.
It's the nature of
Yeah.
the beast. But let's talk a little bit about entertainment surviving pandemic time here. What show or shows are you like, oh, thank God for this. This is what's getting me through.
Well, the one that I really enjoyed, which I, I haven't shared too much outside of this, I saw that Harley Quinn animated series. Did you
Oh
see that?
yeah, yeah. I've
Oh my
seen the
God,
bumper.
that's
I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
Oh, that is so good. That
Okay.
is so funny. Now I didn't expect to get it because it's on HBO Max,
Yes.
but it turned out that at least in the U.S. again, it turned out that my Xfinity account included that, and
Oh.
I can't get it on the Roku. They're still arguing
Okay.
over
Of
money,
course. Of
but
course.
I can watch it on a laptop. I have a little tablet that when I'm riding my exercise bike, I can watch that. And there's two full seasons, and they are just a riot. And in fact, the only thing I'm unhappy about is I finished them. Then I got to wait for
Oh,
season
what a
three.
bummer.
So that's been great. I also reread all the Harry Dresden novels. The Jim Butcher, he writes the what they call urban fantasy. So it's a lot of magic realism and stuff inside down, in cities and stuff. And the latest novel in his Harry Dresden series comes out this week.
Okay.
So I'm really looking forward to that. I reread all the books before that.
Nice.
Of course, I should be doing my regular work, but that's a
Ah,
you know
well, that's a a future
different
problem
issue.
for a future person to deal with. Yeah, it is interesting that the show that I've fallen in love with lately is Ted Lasso on the Apple TV Plus, whatever Apple calls
Oh,
their TV.
I don't have that one.
I know you're an Android guy. I can't even get into that with you. You know,
I have a Mac. I mean,
I know. Well, because you have to. I mean, how could you even do our job without a Mac? I don't understand. I see these people with non-Macs, and I'm like, ugh, what? Ugh,
are you going to
no.
get the new iPhone?
Seriously? You even have to ask that? Like,
Yeah, I
do you
figured.
even know who I am, sir? I mean, I thought we were friends. I thought you've known me a long time. I'm just a little disappointed in that, but I don't know when it's coming out. I haven't seen
I'm
that
just
yet, but
giving you an opportunity to talk about it. That's
sure,
all.
no, I appreciate that. I did order a new watch because I try to do that every other year is kind of
Uh,
my general gist on the watch. I figure I don't really need a watch every year, but you'll pry my brand new iPhone out of my cold dead hands because that's how I think. But yeah, Ted Lasso, Victor got blanking on Victor. I don't want to mispronounce Victor's last name, but he just actually tweeted about that. I think either this morning or last night, and I replied to it and was like, "Yes, this is the content that I'm here for. Thank you."
yeah, well, I have too many streaming services at the moment,
Oh
clearly.
yeah, yeah,
And between that and supporting a bunch of creators on Patreon, it's but again, my kid's already I don't have the expenses you do. My kid's
that's true.
already out of school. He's not living at home now. We're good,
Yeah,
so it's time to help the next generation, that sort of thing. But also we've accumulated too many streaming services as a result.
yeah. That is one of the things I find a little puzzling about today. You know, we've talked for years about how do we break apart the cable monopoly and
Right,
give
the
you just the
unbundling,
channels you want. Yeah, the unbundling. And what we've seemingly done is created a new bundle that you end up
right.
buying, and it's like, and it's really aggravating how they spread content around in just such a way that, well, I really want to watch that, and so I have to do this. Like, Mandalorian's a perfect example. I love Mandalorian. It gave me great joy last year. October 31st, the next season of that will come out.
I still haven't watched it.
Oh,
I did fall in love with now I do have CBS All Access because we wanted all the Star Trek shows and Lower Decks. I love Lower Decks,
okay.
and we watched Discovery and everything. New season of Discovery is coming next month. But I fell in love with Hamilton. By the way, I assumed.
Oh
I mean, I didn't
yeah.
want to get Disney Plus, but I had to see Hamilton. Actually, I looked. Really, what happened was is I wasn't going to get it, and I took one look at my wife and went, "Okay, yep,
Yep,
we're
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 getting
getting."
it. We're on it. Yeah.
And
When
then of course
when when Hamilton came out, we watched it that night, and then I know Christine has watched it at least one or two times since then. Yeah, Hamilton was fantastic. So,
amateurs.
well,
I'm not saying I have it memorized at this point, but I've seen it a lot.
I
Yeah,
mean, I've listened to the albums. The like, is album the right word? I don't know. I've listened to the
sure.
soundtrack uh, a lot.
The
There's
first act more than the second. The second gets depressing. But
agreed, but yeah, there's in fact, just the other day I was spouting off certain Hamilton lines just because that's where my brain was
and I
at.
did go to read the book that it was based on,
Mm,
the Ron Chernow's book, and I kind of got bogged down in it.
sure.
But it is interesting. It's a good book, and it gave me a chance to dig into that part of history again. Because I mean, it's the show has some relation to reality, but not it has more relation to reality than say Amadeus has to the
Mm,
life of Mozart,
sure.
and but there are some real liberties taken, of course, but
Sure.
still it gave me a chance to reread some of that stuff, which was kind of fun.
Nice. So assuming we ever get to like travel again, which I think is a
Ah,
safe assumption, where where do you miss going most? What's the place like I can't wait till I can finally get back to this place?
I'm kind of the wrong person to ask because I actually am
You're sort of a
pretty
house
happy
cat.
at home. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind going to back to even to Boston or something. Just to I always enjoyed it there, but
Yeah,
I don't have any particular location. It's more a question of seeing people that I haven't seen in a long time.
100%.
It would be great to see Stu, as you mentioned. It'd be great to see, Glenn down in Austin. To get some barbecue down in Austin would be
Yeah.
wonderful.
Oh, I'm getting
Or to
hungry.
get out to the West Coast where all the sporting events happen 3 hours earlier. Wouldn't that be
Oh,
nice?
I would borderline move to the West Coast just to have everything start earlier. I don't know how
Yeah,
you survive like a Monday night game on the East Coast because some of those games
right.
don't end till like midnight your time, and I'm just like, man, it's got to
Well,
be
I'm a
brutal.
late night person, but yeah, it would be nice to. So I'm not really thinking of where exactly,
Okay.
or at least that doesn't occur to me. But I am thinking of, boy, it'd be nice to just be around some of my friends again, as you say.
Yeah, yeah. I think that first event we're all going to have to add like 2 or 3 days on to our travel schedule just so we can hang out and just make up
Well,
for all the lost time.
we were supposed to go to Bangalore this
I
year
know,
and then to Australia as
I know,
well, and
I know.
now all that's online too. Now, which I'm glad it's happening at all,
Hmm.
and boy, they really know how to run a
Yes, they
conference
do.
there. The GIDS conference, for those who don't know, that great. It used to be Great Indian Developer Summit. Now it's Great International Developer Summit, I think he
Sounds right.
calls it. Right, and they've been running a few days a month for like the last from
Since
July through
July.
December or
Hmm.
something. So I've really enjoyed that, although I've only been active in one, but I've got two major ones in November.
Nice.
So I'm enjoying it, but it was kind of nice to actually go there, especially when I was going there with people I knew were going to be there who
Right.
I could socialize with as well in the in the hotels and everything.
Yeah. No, I had some pretty cool places on the agenda for this year, including, going to Bangalore and to Australia. I think Portugal was in there a couple times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been great.
Well, I was watching the Tour de France, guys, a couple weeks ago, and it just rekindled all that. God, I miss going to Paris, and just all these places that we normally would just sort of check off, and it's like, yep, that didn't happen this year. And
But it's nice to have at least a Twitter feed where I follow a lot of international people, and
right.
sometimes it's easier to scroll through the Twitter feed because maybe 20 to 30% of the tweets will be in languages I can't read. So,
Is that how you maintain your Twitter completism? Are you still on that streak of being Twitter
I
complete?
am. It's a
Wow.
constant effort at curation, right? It's a
Yes.
constant effort to keep the signal to
That's why
noise
you don't
ratio
follow me.
high.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I do actually follow you, believe it or not. In fact, as of this week, I now follow VMware Tanzu, believe it
Thank
or
you.
not.
Thank you.
So that was necessary. But in fact, I had to go through a batch of unfollowing about a week ago. It's not because anybody said something I wasn't happy about or anything like that. I mean, um, I don't follow anybody I don't enjoy following at this point. It's
Sure.
just the volume is just getting high. And of course, with the chaos going on in this country, that'll get progressively worse over the next couple of
Right.
months. I just had to cut back. But yes, I've been catching up every day on Twitter for several years now, and I'm still not quite sure how, but it does limit how many people I can follow.
Right. Yeah, that I remember when you first told me that I was sort of dumbfounded because I am not even remotely close to that. I view Twitter as a stream that just kind of goes by and every so often you flip through some things and then you put it down and come back later. Although I will admit I've spent more time on Twitter over the last 6 months than I probably did in the preceding six, and I'm not sure if that's healthy or not, but
But it's all signal to noise ratio. There's some really good people saying some
100%.
really interesting things. And in fact, the irony is when I first started subscribing to Twitter, I couldn't keep up with it at the beginning because I only followed really good people and it was
Sure.
way too intimidating. I felt like, man, I should be working. I should be doing that. It was just awful. So I had to mix in like writers that I enjoyed or newspaper columnists or sports figures or actors and stuff. And then it balanced it out a lot better. And now I
Sure.
can now I can get value out of it. And of course, as a news mechanism, you can't beat it.
Yeah. Yeah, you do get a lot of very interesting things that way for sure. So,
Yeah, for me, the one that you're describing was Facebook. I'm only on Facebook because my family is, and that's I keep up with that. But I spend minimal amounts of time there. I push the newsletter there. I
sure.
I say hi to my wife.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, that's
watch what's
sufficient.
going on. But and that's a curated feed too. So if
Mm.
I don't participate much, they don't share anything that I'm doing. Whereas at least with Twitter, I know my followers see whatever I
Right,
tweet.
right. Yeah, that's a good point. So just imagine for a moment you're in a hotel room. I mean,
Hmm.
remember what that was like, and you flip on the TV and you're scrolling through the channels and you run into a movie, and okay, you're in now. What's the movie that when you stroll across it, all right, I'm in for the next hour and a half. Doesn't matter where you are in the movie, I'm in.
Oh, I've got a handful that I think are somewhat underrated. Like, did you finally see Mystery Men that I've been pushing on you for years?
I don't think I have.
Mystery Men is a movie from the late 90s, and it's got a phenomenal cast. It's got Ben Stiller, it's got Janine Garofalo, it's got William H. Macy, it has just a whole bunch of them, and they are wannabe superheroes.
Yes,
The
yes, yes,
villain
yes.
is called Casanova Frankenstein and everything. It's a brilliantly great movie. I think it's just criminally underrated.
Yeah,
So if I come into that movie anywhere, I know. I mean, I'll spoil one phenomenal line from that movie, as he says, the shoveler, William H
William
Macy,
H.
he's trying to
Macy.
get everybody's attention, and he says, "Look, people, um, we have let's see, we're on a blind date with destiny, and it looks like she's ordered the lobster." Oh, it's just one brilliant line after another in that
Oh,
thing.
that's
I
awesome.
love that. I've always loved like Adam's Family Values. I think it's just phenomenal. I enjoy that
Nice,
too.
nice.
So I have a handful of
Okay,
movies like that, and some old ones like the Kane Mutiny. I could come in anywhere in that, and I'll know everything going on in that. I push that one a lot.
sure.
That's another one that remarkably few people have seen, only because it's what 60 years old, but still.
Man, you are old.
Well, it was that was an ironic thing is that I knew a guy back when I was in grad school, and we had this ridiculous thing we called this was at Princeton. We had something called the Forrestal Film Society. He was like that because they had a separate campus where a lot of the experimental facilities were located called
Okay.
Forrestal. And what that meant is like three or four of us would go rent some videotapes, VHS, remember those?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we'd go out to Forrestal because they had a little VCR there. I mean, tiny little TV, and we'd watch an old movie and watch a new movie, and that was the Forest Film
Nice,
Society, and
nice.
that's how I know some of the old movies. I mean, at
Okay,
least I'd seen Casablanca, but the Kane
sure.
Mutiny was a classic, and that's how I first got to see that. And then, of course, the good Lord and His infinite wisdom has given us file sharing systems. So there are ways.
Yeah,
You know.
that's fair. Oh, Casablanca is amazing. I remember the first time
Oh,
I
of
watched that,
course.
I'm
I
like,
mean, how
oh
do you
God,
miss
this
that?
really is a pretty phenomenal movie. But well,
Yeah.
should we
But
do a little lightning round? You ready for some?
sure, but you've got to see Mystery Men, though. Let me
I
know when you've seen it.
when you once you described it, I know I have seen it at least once.
Oh,
I probably need it's worth a rewatch, is what I hear you
if you
saying.
didn't think it was wonderful, then don't tell me. So,
Oh no, I won't. I'll keep that for myself. But so
sure, whatever you like.
all right. Well, let me just throw some random questions at you, and we'll see what kind of trouble this gets us into. Coffee, espresso, or tea?
Mostly coffee,
Mhm.
sometimes espresso, sometimes tea, but mostly
I've
coffee.
made you espresso,
Yeah,
and you had it in my little Yoda cup. Judge me by my
but now I
size, do
have
you?
really high standards for it. I mean,
That's
that's the
true.
problem.
That's true. No,
You kind of spoiled me for that.
that was my goal. That was my job. No, I've been
Yeah,
spoiled by that too. Thank you, Blue Bottle.
I like cappuccino as well, though. I
Yeah,
guess
oh yeah. I could have made you a latte, so I know how to do that.
I
That's
get a
about the
vanilla
extent.
latte sometimes, and I'll even stoop to Starbucks, which I know you're not happy about.
I mean, Starbucks good, solid. If you can find the Clover stuff there, ooh, the
Yeah, we don't
Reserve.
have a Pete's. We don't have a Seattle's Best. We don't have any of those in my area. In fact, all we have in my little town is I live in Marlboro. We have two stoplights now.
Oh, you have two
So
now. Wow, that's an
yeah,
upgrade.
two. Right, they're within 100 yards of each other, but
Sure.
they're both off the highway. One in the center of town. We don't have a Starbucks. We're too small for that. We have a
Wow.
Dunkin' Donuts.
That makes sense. They're everywhere in
It's in
your
New
part of the
England.
world. Yeah, it's a New England thing. It's
Yeah,
sort of like coffee, sort of.
right.
Pie or cake?
Cake, no
Oh,
question.
ooh, all right, all right.
Oh
Pumpkin
yeah.
pie is not one of your things. You throw that to the curb.
No, not pumpkin anything really. I've never been fond of it. Whereas cake, that's a problem. Carbs have always been an issue
Ooh,
for me. I
yeah,
have a difficult time resisting carbs.
yeah, I can relate to you there.
Not
I'm
that
a
you can
carb
tell
guy.
or anything.
No, I don't understand these people who are on those keto no carb things. Like, wait, what? It doesn't make any sense. Ocean or mountains?
I'm more of an oceans person.
Okay.
I remember the first time I went to Denver, I actually had difficulty with the altitude. Now
Oh,
I
sure.
never have difficulty anymore,
Right.
but if I went, 10,000 feet or higher, I'm sure I would have a lot of issues with that. Whereas I like the ocean. I mean,
Yeah.
that's great. You
Yeah.
didn't ask tabs or spaces, though. I mean, that's what I was waiting
It's on my list, sir.
for.
You're
Okay,
getting
never
ahead of
mind.
me. Good Lord. So we're going out to dinner. Do you want to hit the food truck or you want to go to the Michelin star place that I know about?
Oh my goodness, I'm much more of a food truck person. Oh yeah, there's so many people on the No Fluff Tour who are real foodies, and I'm kind of the opposite of a foodie. It's all kind of wasted on me, and I know that's a failing, that's a deficiency in me, but it's one I've carried most of my life, so I don't think it's going to change anytime
Yeah,
soon.
we've tried. It's just not going to take with you. It's okay.
Yeah,
It's
it's
okay.
just not worth it for me. So
Now you mentioned you're reading a book recently here. Are you ebook guy, paper book guy? Depends. Where are you at on that?
Kindle books. I read almost everything on a Kindle reader. I don't have a Kindle. I have a Kindle reader,
Hmm.
but I've been reading them on my phone or on the laptop or on a tablet. That's because I don't have to worry about lighting or
Yeah.
shadows. It remembers where I was. I don't have to worry about a bookmark. I can make the font any size I like. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I like that you can do the highlighting and everything else, and it's one I can
Yeah,
carry one thing with me.
technical books a little different. I mean that I mostly go through Safari for that stuff,
Sure.
but just reading for pleasure, Kindle books for me.
Nice, nice. Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings?
I was a Game of the Thrones until they ruined it with the last couple seasons, especially the last
Mm,
season was a disaster. So I was interested. I was a Lord of the Rings person. I first read it in middle school
okay.
and then reread it in grad school as I was desperately trying to do anything to avoid writing my thesis.
Can't imagine.
So, oh, it's a great avoidance mechanism. I think the movies, frankly, are better than most of the writing in the books. I think they, especially the middle movie, they really improved on. Tolkien could get very wordy and really drag there for a while.
Sure,
But I enjoyed the movies. The Hobbit movies were kind of a disaster. They were not good. But the original, the trilogy, those were good.
sure. Yeah. I really am saddened by the fact we probably aren't going to get any more Game of Thrones books at this point. Just based on what we've seen so far, I'm not really guessing much is going to
I would
happen.
have
And
thought he'd be annoyed enough at the way the series ran on TV that he'd want to complete the books just to show that's not what I meant.
yeah, we'll
But
see what
we'll see.
happens. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
So DC or Marvel?
I've always been a Marvel person, even though I like some of the DC stuff. Obviously, the Nolan Batman movies, the
Yeah,
old
those are strong.
Superman stuff, the Christopher Reeve Superman, although
Yeah,
just the first one, I never cared for the others. But and of course, the Wonder Woman movie was excellent. But I've really, when I was back in the '80s, I collected Marvel comics, X-Men primarily, and related ones. And then I kind of got out of all that.
sure.
So I haven't really read physical comic books for a while, although I do occasionally pick up a graphic novel.
Nice, nice. Action, comedy, or drama?
That's all dependent on the mood.
Okay,
What it depends on the movie, it depends on the mood. So
sure.
I usually look for drama actually, but then my wife wants to watch comedy. We're like, sure. These days comedy is really a relief.
There have been so many nights I look at Christine and I'm like, I just need something funny.
Right.
Anything funny. I've been watching a lot of like comedy specials on HBO. You brought up HBO earlier,
Yeah.
catching up on some of those old specials and even some of
Yeah,
the new
my
ones.
boy loved that stuff.
Oh, so good. There was actually there was one that we ran into, and I'm blanking on the comedian's name, but it was filmed here in Minneapolis. Literally had to be just days before everything shut down. It was like early March or something. It's like wow. So if I wanted to get a hold of you, am I best off emailing you, texting you, or tweeting you? And I think that's kind of funny since yesterday I'm pretty sure we did all three of those things.
Yeah, I keep up on all three. I don't I guess probably easiest would be text, I suppose, but honestly, any of those three is fine for me. I don't keep Slack open. That's the one I try to shut down. you know,
Yeah,
because I like to have RAM left on my computer.
right,
I'd
right,
like to have
right.
the fan stop after a while.
Understood. Yeah, I think computers now should really just come instead. Don't tell me how many gigs of RAM you have. Just tell me, how many Slack channels can I have open before you come to a crashing
Exactly.
halt. Or Chrome tabs, right? I mean, they're both pretty much a
Well, Chrome
universal
tabs,
language.
I've got way too many of those. Yeah.
I actually, before this, I went through and closed a whole bunch of tabs and windows because I realized I've had too many things just sitting around that I'm okay. I clearly am not going to read this, so go away. If it
Mm.
was important, I would have read it by now. But so if you have something you need to write down, do you open the Notes app on your phone, or do you have a physical notebook paper thing that you prefer to use?
Google Docs. I go doc.new and just
Nice.
that makes a new Google Doc immediately. I take my notes in there and then I save it as whatever it happens to be. And that way it's got a date on it and I know where to find it and what it was all about. So I live on that. I don't have an app on my phone, but I could still access Google Docs through my phone. So that
Sure.
works too.
Yeah, I have done both, and I very distinctly remember sitting in one of Venkat's presentations thinking, God, this is a really good idea. I wish I would have thought of doing a presentation on this. And I looked back in my notebook and I had written that down and,
Yeah.
missed the step of actually going through to build the talk. But
That's not going to get better as you get older. Just warning you.
No, no, I understand. Well, I've long since realized I have to just write it down if something's happening. I need to do it, otherwise it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But so you already asked me this one. I'll throw it out there. Tabs or spaces, Mister Getting ahead of
Um,
me.
Interestingly enough, it's spaces, but I hit a tab key and have them translated to spaces.
Oh,
And the reason that is because if you're pasting into some kind of book format, tabs get all messed up because tab stops are not something you always have control over when you are writing ASCII doc or whatever like that.
sure.
So I want spaces, but I don't want to hit space 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 space. I want to hit a tab and have it translate to spaces. But it's really that's what made me pick one. It's
Ah,
because of the publishing, it's
oh,
because of
sure.
writing books.
Oh, fantastic. How about Emacs or Vim?
I used Emacs back in the 90s. I remember that. We moved on, So I never got to be good at Vim, but I have it. I know it's everywhere. I'll use it if I every once in a while I think, I'm going to learn some of these shortcuts and then I spend an hour and then of course I forget them all.
Yeah.
But I'll live with Vim. I've got some nice color modes and everything in there. But Emacs, I haven't really started up Emacs since 1998, something like that.
I think it looks about the same. So,
I used to have a phenomenal .emacs file. It was great. Oh, it had all these shortcuts and features back when I used LaTeX and everything.
oh
But
yeah.
I mean, that's so many hard drive crashes ago.
Oh,
Who knows?
that's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, that's the end of my lightning round questions. Let me see if there's
Ah,
anything else I wanted to talk about here. Is there well, what's going on? I know you mentioned a book. Tell me more about the book. I know
ah.
it's on the shelf behind me. I think my head's actually covering it up right now, but
Well, I've got four at the moment.
oh,
The
only
latest one.
four. Okay. Are you trying to implement the Venkat interface?
Well, Venkat Lite, maybe.
Right,
You
right.
know, So you'll talk to him next, I
Yeah,
suppose.
actually, I think he is
Tell him
my
I
next
said
guest.
hi.
I
I
will.
was
I will.
writing a Kotlin book. What's not fair about Venkat, of course, is I started my Kotlin cookbook, and then he started his Kotlin book, and he finished his Kotlin book, and then I finished mine.
Who would have
Because
guessed it?
as we learn on the tour, you do not compare yourself to Venkat
Nope.
on any scale other than maybe height.
Right,
You know,
right, right.
yeah. So, at any rate, that Colin Cookbook was out in last December. The one I'm working on now is finally taking that managing your manager presentation and
Oh,
turning it into
fantastic.
a book. That'll be out from Pragmatic Programmers. I'm about to go out to first review for
Awesome.
some of that. Maybe like a 50% review. I've got
Cool.
more than that done, but it's a little bit ways to go. I've been astonished at how much that's changing now that I'm writing it down. I mean, I've been giving that
Sure.
talk on the tour for 6, 7 years, and I give a presentation on it on the O'Reilly Learning Platform, a course, and everything. And yet, and on the No Fluff Just Stuff virtual workshops too. And yet, writing it down, it's all changing again.
Oh, I
It's
bet.
really going to be interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it is really interesting when you take a material like that you've sort of worked with for a long time and then you try writing it down. I mean, I did the same thing with thinking architecturally, a presentation I'd given
Right.
forever, and then turn it into a ebook report, whatever you want to call it thing. And it is interesting to see how that does tweak, what you're thinking about. So,
Yeah,
well,
I'm
so
amazed. That's my life right now. So it's getting that done.
so if people are like, man, I want to know more about this Ken Cousin character, where should they go to find out more?
Well, I have a homepage, but really the way to find out what I'm doing any given week is I have a free newsletter on Substack. I mean, it's Ken Cousin, so KOUSEN.substack.com, and it will always be free. I'm never going to turn that into a money making venture or anything, which is funny, by the way. Substack claims that I have 0 subscribers because
I,
nobody's
I
paying for it.
subscribed, so there's
Yeah,
got to
my,
be more
no,
than zero.
No, my email list, they acknowledge my
Oh,
email
okay,
list
okay,
has about, I mean, at the moment it's about 850 people,
nice.
but 0 subscribers according to them because they're not getting income from it.
See, I see.
But at any rate, that's what I put that out every Sunday as describing what I'm doing and where I'm. And I'm also on Twitter at Ken Cousin as well. And my policy on LinkedIn invites is I say yes as long as it's obviously not a recruiter or somebody trying to sell me consulting services.
Nice. Yeah, I should probably get on the LinkedIn one of these years. My wife was on me about that, but such is life.
It's actually used a lot more than I thought.
Really?
Once I started posting the newsletter there too, boy, I get a lot more feedback there, and some of the user groups like the London Java community. I did a talk there, and they're very active
Really?
on LinkedIn.
Huh.
Interestingly enough, I was quite surprised, but there's a lot more to that than I expected, especially given that they're owned by what are they, Microsoft now or something?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, because LinkedIn Learning is now part of Microsoft of all things.
Hmm.
Boy, I never figured that. So,
Well, we're Microsoft owns GitHub.
yeah, well,
It's
Spring
a
Source
different
is owned
time.
by VMware. Who saw that coming?
Again. Well, Ken, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been great catching up with you. Again, for me, this is partially therapeutic, just an opportunity to hang out with my friends again. So thank you for being my first guest. I appreciate that. Hopefully this will be on YouTube at some point. I'll make sure you get the link so you can send it out. And again, I think it'll be a podcast. I don't know. I mean, it's a work in progress. It's WHIP. This is part of my WHIP list or something. I guess we'll call it that. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. I very much appreciate it. For those of you that are still around, next week I will have the aforementioned Venkat Subramaniam, the man, the myth, the legend, the remarkably lifelike Venkat Subramaniam. So I'm very excited about that. This will normally be every other Monday, but when Venkat says he can meet with you on the 5th, you meet with him on the 5th because he literally said every other Monday he's booked for the rest of the year, which I was surprised he even had that day open. So I was
Yep.
willing to do it at any time that it worked for Venkat, but next week it is. So we'll see
Well,
him
tell him
next
I
week.
said hi, please.
I will pass that along, and please extend my best wishes to your lovely wife.
Oh, likewise. And thank you so much again. This is really fun. I appreciate the opportunity. And even though it was your own little show here,
Yeah,
that was wonderful. No, I can't give you a hard time. I'm sorry. So
I
good
appreciate
to
that.
see you.
It was good to see you too, buddy. Thank you very much. All right, well, everybody, thanks. I'm going to hit the stop button and see what kind of trouble that gets us into, but thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.